Welcome to Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone and the Libertarian Institute. This is an excerpt from the great fiction by Hans-Hermann Hoppe, section titled The Fundamental Error of Statism. As widespread as the standard view regarding the necessity of the institution of a state as the provider of law and order is, it stands in clear contradiction to elementary economic and moral laws and principles. First of all, among economists and philosophers, two nearly universally accepted positions exist. 1. Every monopoly is bad from the viewpoint of consumers. Monopoly is here understood in its classic meaning as an exclusive privilege granted to a single producer of a commodity or service, or as the absence of free entry into a particular line of production. Only one agency, A, may produce a given good or service, X. Such a monopoly is bad for consumers because shielded from potential new entrants into a given area of production, the price of the product will be higher and its quality lower than otherwise under free competition. 2. The production of law and order, i.e. of security, is the primary function of the state, as just defined. Security is here understood in the wide sense adopted in the American Declaration of Independence as the protection of life, property, and the pursuit of happiness from domestic violence, crime, as well as external foreign aggression, war. Both propositions are apparently incompatible with each other. This has rarely caused concern among philosophers and economists. However, and insofar as it has, the typical reaction has been one of taking exception to the first proposition rather than the second, yet there exist fundamental theoretical reasons and mountains of empirical evidence that it is indeed the second proposition that is in error. As a territorial monopolist of ultimate decision-making and law enforcement, the state is not just like any other monopoly, such as a milk or car monopoly that produces milk and cars of comparatively lower quality and higher prices. In contrast to all other monopolists, the state not only produces inferior goods, but bads, non-goods. In fact, it must first produce bads such as taxation before it can produce anything that might be considered an inferior good. If an agency is the ultimate judge in every case of conflict, then it is also judge in all conflicts involving itself. Consequently, instead of merely preventing and resolving conflict, a monopolist of ultimate decision-making will also cause and provoke conflict in order to settle it to his own advantage. That is, if one can only appeal to the state for justice, justice will be perverted in favor of the state, constitutions and supreme courts notwithstanding. These constitutions and courts are state constitutions and courts, and whatever limitations on state action they may set or find are invariably determined by agents of the very same institutions under consideration. Predictably, the definition of property and protection will be continually altered and the range of jurisdiction expanded to the state's advantage. The idea of some given, eternal, and immutable law that must be discovered will disappear and be replaced by the idea of law as legislation, as arbitrary state-made law. Moreover, as ultimate judge, the state is also a monopolist of taxation, i.e., it can unilaterally, without the consent of everyone affected, determine the price that its subjects must pay for the state's provision of perverted law. However, a tax-funded life and property protection agency is a contradiction in terms, an expropriating property protector. Motivated, as everyone is, by self-interest and the disutility of labor, but equipped with the unique power to tax, state agents will invariably strive to maximize expenditures on protection, and almost all of the nation's wealth can conceivably be consumed by the cost of protection, and at the same time to minimize the actual production of protection. The more money one can spend and the less one must work for it, the better off one will be. Thank you for watching Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone and the Libertarian Institute.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. We have seen domestic terror, and that's the police.
Okay.
What the police are doing to this population is absolutely outrageous. It's even worse in other parts of the world because they're unarmed. But to say that it's anything other than a terrorist attack, which is meaning keeping the civilization in a state of fear and submission, I think is something that needs to be pointed out.
And I will honestly, at a point where I think I came into 2020 with more of like a back to the blue mindset, and then just being on the field and interacting with police and seeing the way that they weren't looking to enact justice or to uphold the sanctity of a society, that these were just political extensions that had the ability to use force with immunity. It sort of began to change my mindset, and realizing just because some good people and many good people work in the police force doesn't mean that the force is for good necessarily.
There are no good people working for the police. There are kind people. There are smart people. How much money would Gretchen Whitmer have to pay you for you to shut down a little girl's lemonade stand? How much money would Mario Cuomo have to pay you to tell someone that they can't see their dying mother in the hospital? How much money would Gavin Newsom have to pay you to tell someone that they can't go to a funeral? You cannot do these things in a good conscience, look yourself in the face, and say you're the good person. It's the corrupt ones who at least you can bribe to let you go your own way. If you are shutting down a gym or a bar where people know the risks and are not harming anyone, you are the enemy of civilization, and you are not a good person, no matter how nice you are to your family.
I feel like, when you're on when very rarely we have guests on where you're like, you actually learned something new, and you think, it's like, I thought that before, but I have never been able to articulate it. I guess you can't, because I literally could not be paid to do anything evil to these people. Like, I couldn't be like, hey man, you're not wearing a mask. Here's a ticket for $400. Hey, you cut somebody's hair. Let me put you in jail. I couldn't physically do it. So like, to put it into perspective of like, these people are being bribed by the government. These are like corrupt individuals from the beginning of time that are willing to take money from a corrupt entity to enact their will and their dominion. I mean, I had never thought about police like that, but I mean, obviously we have law enforcement